Okay, so first video about a comic, but there will be many more in future. Looking at this one as a starting point, because working on the Alien timeline for 25 years makes one a stickler for continuity. With a what-if comic, you can safely ignore continuity and just enjoy the story, particularly when Carter Burke himself, Paul Reiser, is part of the creative team. Or so you might think. If you're a stickler for continuity, there's a few problems right away. And be warned, spoilers abound, and a bit of a rant. They won't all be like this, promise. Page 2 names Gorman as Lieutenant William Gorman, despite the Weyland-Yutani report naming him Scott, due to his first initial being S in the film and not W. Minor error, but also a lack of attention to detail. By page 9, the comic plays out like a condensed version of the film till Burke gets nabbed by an alien, and the what-if part starts. Next comes a fairly large howler. Burke wakens in the hive just before Vasquez and Gorman blow themselves up, and the explosion frees Burke, who is apparently nearby. The film establishes, a number of times, that the hive is in the atmosphere processor. They drive there earlier and fly there later. It's like a kilometre away. It's not downstairs. Vasquez and Gorman blow up about 3 minutes after Burke is grabbed, so any alien would still be carrying him back to the nest. Even if we give them the benefit of the doubt and say, hey, this is a what if. What if the aliens had a new nest in the colony by this point? That argument is completely undermined by going back to the film with Ripley exiting the elevator in the AP station sublevel to look for Newt. Burke rides up to find the dropship. Ramp open. We'll ignore that. He stows away and survives. Ripley battles the Queen on the Sulaco while Burke hides unnoticed in a cargo hold till everyone is asleep. Not sure what this is supposed to mean. Burke contacts Yen-Yutani, who seems very high up for a junior exec to be contacting, and an utterly ridiculous exchange takes place. Yutani is pissed that there are no specimens and holds Burke responsible. Burke counters that the company will be responsible for the deaths of the colonists since they paid for the atmosphere processor. There's no mention of the company co-financing the colony with colonial administration, which would also have them on the hook. Then Burke makes quite the leap that the scandal could take the whole company down. When Yutani says they won't be sending a retrieval ship, Burke says, "You can't leave me here to die." But the Sulaco is on its way home, which is just 3 weeks away. Why the need for a retrieval ship? There seems to be an inexplicable assumption that the Sulaco is just drifting. Burke tries to reason that if Ripley was found once after the Nostromo, she could be found again, and tell everyone what happened. Yutani says he has to take care of everyone who can talk. Burke says he can't do it. Yutani then says that Burke's wife and daughter will learn that he died on LV-426 with everyone else. Burke agrees but extracts a lifelong contract with benefits, then starts the fire that we see at the start of Alien 3, and the EEV ejects landing on Fiorina 161. Another problem here, one that pervades the entire series, is Burke saying he can't murder the others, when not only in the film, but this very comic just a few pages earlier recaps how he was trying to murder Ripley and Newt. He absolutely can murder people if needed. In the film, it was to save himself because Ripley was going to blow the whistle on him for not warning the colonists, whom he is also responsible for. Here, he actually admires Ripley and stops short of killing her, hoping she will take the company down. No, I don't know why either, since he now has a lifelong contract. The remainder of the first issue is set 35 years later with Burke on a trimonite mine on an asteroid in deep space named D350L8. He's a mining operations and assets manager for Kelland Mining, a Weyland-Yutani subsidiary first mentioned in Tim Lebbon's novel Out of the Shadows. We learned he's estranged from his adult daughter Bree, who also works on the asteroid, and also that he has a reputation as the man who wanted to smuggle xenomorphs back to Earth and endanger humanity. So the company sold him out as an utter arsehole. But he says there's more to the story which he can't talk about because of non-disclosure agreements. Again, this pervades the rest of the series, that he's been hard done by, when he hasn't. He's absolutely an arsehole who wanted to smuggle xenomorphs back to Earth. The company manages to enhance its reputation by showing mercy to this quote-unquote Judas and offering him work, despite them wanting him to smuggle xenomorphs back to Earth. However, he has a plan for redemption, in the form of an alien egg that an android named Cygnus has procured after 20 years of searching. Cygnus is perhaps named because it starts with C following Ash and Bishop, and Call doesn't exist in this what-if. At least not yet. Issue 2 goes into a lot of exposition about Burke's plan. His wife Zoe is critically ill and has been in hypersleep for over 30 years. He rescued and rewired Cygnus back then to find an alien egg, so he can use the alien's DNA to inject its acidic compounds into malignant cells, thus curing his wife's illness. Indeed, everyone's illness, and thus redeem himself. He's still estranged from his daughter, which we're continually reminded of. Apparently he found out all this information about alien DNA when he was a special projects director, i.e. before the film. How is unclear, since he tells Ripley in the film he didn't even know if the derelict existed, which is one of the reasons he couldn't warn the colonists, whom he was ultimately responsible for killing and wrote off as a bad call. Following this, Burke and Cygnus interview a bunch of his staff to work out who is the most irritating and therefore the candidate to have a facehugger implant them. It's very office space and quite anachronistic for an office environment in the early 23rd century. It's still very 1990s. It's also uneven and uncertain what he's trying to do. Burke and Cygnus agree that they don't want to kill anyone and want to extract plasma from the embryo and remove it from the host before it bursts, which shouldn't make the decision especially difficult. They could pick anyone, and if everything works out and they crack the shits, give them a bonus. So we have a few jokey pages of office humour, and the wisecracking corporate from the film shines through a bit more, which is nice. Then he violently attacks Hero Yu, who has just arrived to investigate a plethora of complaints about Burke from his staff, mainly from his daughter, and straps him to a chair so a facehugger can jump on him. Cygnus says the chances of the plan working are very low, despite saying just 6 pages earlier that he would ensure that the host would live. Maybe he's referring to Burke not getting fired? Who can tell? Issue 3 starts with Yu revealing himself to be in fact Hiro Yutani, a lesser son of Shin Yutani. I think it's a rule that any Japanese person in an alien comic has to be a Yutani. He pleads for his life as the slowest facehugger in existence crawls out of the egg. Yutani says he can get Burke all the resources he needs to conduct his experiments, and as the facehugger leaps, Burke bats it away with an IV stand. Of course, it escapes into the air ducts which lead to the mine. Burke, Cygnus and Yutani run down and meet Bree. More animosity ensues. They stand around and have a chat while the hugger lurks unseen above, and Yutani stays with Bree to tell her it's on the loose, while Burke and Cygnus go look for it. It takes 2.5 pages of banter to deliver one short sentence. Although it must be said, there is the odd cool little Burkish quip here and there. The facehugger attacks Burke and Cygnus grabs it, throwing it away into another vent because reasons. Literally. Burke shouts at Cygnus for letting it go, but we just go back to Bree and Yutani. Burke actually highlights this painfully repetitive writing a few pages later, when Cygnus tries to kill the hugger and Burke stops him while it escapes into yet another vent. Yutani dons a mining suit and he and Bree track the hugger to an elevator just as Harold, one of the miners, appears and is hugged. Bree and Yutani bond over a drink and a shag, where the former explains she can't go back to Earth because her lungs have atrophied from spending her life on an asteroid, and the latter says his father is worse than Bree's. Burke and Cygnus monitor Harold and the running gag of the chances of success, which went from 95 to 90 to 80 to 70, becomes 0, as Harold bursts half an hour before he was expected to. It's possibly a bit nitpicky to mention that queens take days to gestate, as per Alien 3, and don't birth faster than normal, because this what if has reframed Alien 3 as Burke starting the fire and not a facehugger. However, Cygnus' report earlier tells us that he found the remains of a canine hybrid alien on Fiorina 161, among other remains on a stack of other worlds. So did Burke start the fire on the Sulaco to cause the EEV to eject, or was it really a facehugger? Moving right along. There's another overly long conversation while people should be reacting to a crisis as Burke goes to Bree's room and finds her with Yutani. Cygnus has been ripped apart by the baby queen, off page, which is rather strange considering he's been a major character up to now, and they suit up in mining gear in order to take it out before it reaches full size. They find cocooned miners and the queen has already reached full size and laid a bunch of eggs in like half an hour. None of the miners appear to be impregnated yet, and they plan to free them after they take the queen out. Then Yutani turns on them, saying he can get back in his father's good books if he delivers a queen xenomorph, which he seems to know a lot about in spite of the company apparently not having specimens to learn from, hence his need to get one. Burke and Bree are knocked out and later wake up stuck to a wall. How they got stuck to a wall is a mystery, with the Queen already stuck to the ceiling and laying eggs. Also a mystery, how Burke knows that it was Vasquez who detonated the grenade that freed him at Hadley, from an air duct above him / an air duct a kilometre away, setting aside that it was Gorman anyway. While Burke is explaining about how he escaped, he says he was a different person back then, which goes against the whole thing about him being misunderstood this whole time and how nothing was really his fault. It was at this point I'm starting to wonder, and actually hoping, if this is less what if and more Burke having a fever dream while he's still cocooned back at the colony decades earlier. It would certainly explain the inconsistencies in repetitious writing. Bree frees them with an oxy torch, and as an egg containing the second slowest facehugger in existence opens near Burke, they run off to warn the office workers, who head to a freighter to evacuate. Bree says she can't leave because her lungs will collapse. Burke explains that this was a lie. He just didn't want her to leave. He was a different person back then. Or now. Who can tell? He then explains to her further shock that her mother, whom she believed to be dead, is alive in hypersleep. They go to the chamber and find Zoe's cryotube missing. The final issue reveals that it's not actually a fever dream, but is also the most fun issue. The aliens attack the office workers who were trying to escape. Burke has a sudden fit of selflessness and goes back to help the people who exist in a state of mutual loathing, while Yutani escapes with Zoe still in cryosleep and an alien egg, gaining his father's favour at last. Bree lumbers in with her mining mech, and she and her father, with his pulse rifle, take out the Queen, which has waded into the fray instead of laying eggs like queens are supposed to, because they needed some kind of showdown. Fortunately, the acid is little more than a minor inconvenience, with one of the office workers getting hurt, but Bree completely unscathed despite being inches from the Queen when its face is shot off. They evacuate and head back to Earth, with Burke and Bree reconciling, and the former resolved to get his wife back and take down the company, thus setting up a follow-up series. The wisecracking and action of the last issue, while pretty silly, does go some way to redeeming the disappointment of the preceding 4 issues. And despite Burke's whole bullshit "I'm really an okay guy" shtick throughout the series, that was constantly at odds with his actions, here he does actually go some way to being an okay guy. In the wash-up, this series should have been a slam dunk. By being almost completely untethered from other continuity, they could really do what they wanted. Unfortunately, the bits that were tethered to existing continuity were completely fumbled and permeated the series, leaving the only positive being Paul Reiser's voice as Burke. Aliens What If is written by Paul Reiser, Leon Reiser, Adam F. Goldberg, Brian Volk-Weiss, and Hans Rodionoff. Art is by Guiu Villanova and colours by Yen Nitro. Available through Marvel Comics.